is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories this hour. Erdogan re-elected. Turkey's president extends his rule into a third decade. Attacks on Kyiv continue as shelling's reported on the Russian side of the border with Ukraine. Spain's Prime Minister calls for snap elections after his party received a drubbing in regional polls. A blueprint for reducing plastic waste. Round 2 of UN talks to reduce pollution start in Paris. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won an unprecedented third decade in power after beating his coalition rivals in a runoff poll. Securing just over 52% of the vote in a tense second round, Erdogan told thousands of party supporters in Ankara the entire nation of 85 million has won. Conceding defeat, opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu described the elections as the most unfair in years. The veteran Republican who led the six-party alliance seeking to oust Erdogan warned of dark days ahead for the nation. World leaders, including China's President Xi Jinping, have been offering their congratulations to Erdogan after a campaign that saw the country split on ideological grounds. But in signs of more trouble ahead for the Turkish economy, the lira slumped to new lows on money markets after Erdogan's victory was announced. Calling for national unity after the result, Erdogan said he planned to rule for all Turkish citizens.
Milletimizin bize verdiği sorumluluğun gereği olarak.
As part of the responsibility our nation has given us, we are not angry, resentful or upset with anyone. Now is the time to put aside all the debates and conflicts regarding the election and unite around our national goals and dreams.
Voters on both sides of the political divide have been giving their reaction to the result.
Thank God he was elected. It's a good result because Tayyip Erdogan is a good leader. He knows what the people want. If people have been voting for him for 20 years, he must be a successful leader. He's a leader that Turkey deserves. There is nothing else to say about it. If the people prefer him, I say Tayyip Erdogan is the best, and I support him in any way.
I think it was an unjust election because the country is in a bad situation. I pray to God that he's going to be good for everyone. We had a different candidate in our hearts, someone who could really lead this country, but it didn't work out. Let's just hope for the best.
Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Michal Bardavid, who's in Istanbul. Michal, we've heard a little bit there, so some reaction. How are people in Turkey digesting the news of this result?
Well, Juliet, I mean, basically, for those AK Party supporters, it's a time for celebration. They have been celebrating since it was quite clear that Erdogan won last night. But for the rest of the country, the 48% who voted for Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, another 5 years with Erdogan basically right now means that it is devastating for them. With Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, they were basically voting for change, a change in the way that the system is being governed, the country is being governed, a change in the way that the economic policies have been decided upon, especially placed by Erdogan with unorthodox economic policies, and a change in the way that they think the country should be more democratic, more just, and more supportive of their freedom. And even though yesterday Erdogan in his speech stated that there would be no resentment or anger towards anyone and that it was a time to unite towards the goals of the country, still just a moment later he criticized and ridiculed the LGBT community, and he also stressed that under his rule, the former pro-Kurdish HDP leader, Selahattin Demirtas, he would be staying in jail. So if you ask the mood here in Turkey, basically I can say that it's still deeply divided and polarized, and that's what's being reflected here.
Michal, what more has the opposition had to say about their defeat?
Well, basically, there were a lot of complaints and criticism from the opposition sides regarding the way that the electoral process took place, the way that they had to run their campaign. And Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu last night, when he made a statement, the thing that he underlined the most was that he believed, and I quote, they witnessed the most unfair election in recent years. All state resources were mobilized for a single political party. So what he's basically referring to is the media coverage. The opposition, I can't really say that they received a lot of media coverage. Most of the national networks were being provided to the AK Party, and especially covering what Erdogan's statements are, what his campaigning is supporting. And this was also underlined by international observers who made their statements today regarding the way that the campaign process continued here. Kılıçdaroğlu also warned that there may be dark days ahead in Turkey. He also stated that he would be continuing a fight against to establish a true democracy here in Turkey. Now, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is the candidate of the Nation Alliance, and that is made up of 6 parties. The Meral Akşener is the leader of the E-Party. It's the second largest of the Nation Alliance. She was the first to congratulate Erdogan. And I have to say, after the first round, the 6 party leaders of the Nation Alliance, they stood up together and they made a joint statement. But after this round, we haven't still heard a joint statement from this Nation Alliance from the table of 6 of what they've called. So there may be some uncertainties regarding the future of this alliance. Juliet?
Michal Bar-David in Istanbul, thank you very much. Well, Umut Korkut is Professor of International Politics at Glasgow Caledonian University, and he joins us now. Erdogan's rule is now extending into a 3rd decade, so what can we expect over the next 5 years?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty much the same, I believe, because Erdogan does not really have any new policy field to play any longer. The situation with the economy is, as we know, the foreign politics in Turkey is pretty much, at a dead's end in terms of relations with the West and in terms of relations with regional powers, including Israel. And relations with America are really at their low point. So I pretty much think that actually this is going to be pretty much the same for the next coming 5 years, unless we see a twist of heart in Erdogan and his party and a possible approach with the West.
Now, in his acceptance speech, Erdogan didn't mention the economy, which is very wobbly. So can we expect more of the same when it comes to economic policy as well?
I mean, Erdogan managed to present himself as the person who can sort out the mess that he created in terms of the economy, and he seemed to have convinced the Turkish electorate for that. He's really rather embedded in terms of keeping the interest rates really low, and he has this non-orthodox policies in terms of thinking that interest rates are the cause of inflation, and rather than a panacea. So I mean, once again, it will just demand him a lot to have a twist of heart in terms of introducing new economic policies. But I mean, the economy is at that dead's end at the moment, and he will have to do something about it one way or another.
Be interested to know what you think the reaction is going to be from investors and what this victory means for the region and the rest of the world.
I think it's a very good question. It looks like actually for the region and the rest of the world, it is the devil that you know. For the West, actually, they don't have to deal with a democratizing Turkey that may have increased its EU membership aspirations. For the regional powers, in the Middle East, including Russia, actually, they know they've been working with Erdogan all these years, so they know how he's going to react. In fact, when you looked into the foreign leaders who congratulated him first, they were more or less authoritarian leaders in the region. And for the investors, once again, I mean, Turkey had turned into a basket case. However, today it seems like the Istanbul stock market is on the rise. So they may have a certain different expectation. But once again, we need to see the cabinet that Erdogan is going to set in place, and then we will understand the shape of the economy further afterwards.
Interesting to see the team he builds around him. Umut Korkut, Professor of International Politics at Glasgow Caledonian, thank you.
Thank you.
Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has called a snap election for the 23rd of July after his party suffered heavy losses in local elections. Sanchez had previously said he wanted to see out a full term in office, with elections taking place in December. But Sunday's results saw opposition Conservatives performing better than expected.
I've informed the head of state of my intention to hold a cabinet meeting this afternoon to dissolve Parliament and call a general election. The election will take place on Sunday, July the 23rd, according to the time frame established by law. I have made this decision based on the election results yesterday.
Tensions remain high in Kosovo after ethnic Serbs attempted to take over local government buildings in the north. Police and NATO-led forces were seen protecting the municipality offices targeted after the election of ethnic Albanian mayors in snap elections that were boycotted by the local Serbian community. 4 people have died after a tourist boat capsized on Lake Maggiore in northern Italy. Firefighters say 19 people survived by swimming to shore after a whirlwind overturned the boat late on Sunday. The passengers had been celebrating a birthday before the storm hit. Saudi Arabia and the United States have appealed for an extension to a shaky ceasefire soon to expire in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Despite the truce, heavy and sustained fighting continued on Monday, and both the army and the RSF are being blamed for the violence. That's hampered efforts to deliver humanitarian aid and restore essential civilian services. China's foreign ministry has called for dialogue over growing tensions around the DPRK's planned satellite launch in the next 2 weeks. And Pyongyang recently announced it's completed its first military spy satellite, and Kim Jong-un has approved final preparations for the launch. In response, Japan said it had put ballistic missile defense on alert and warned it would shoot down any projectile that threatened its territory. China says it hopes all parties concerned will stick to the direction of a political settlement.
The situation on the Korean Peninsula has come to where it is for a reason. We hope that all parties concerned will face the issue head-on, stick to the direction of a political settlement and address their legitimate concerns in a balanced manner through meaningful dialogue.
People in Kyiv sought shelter overnight as Russia launched fresh attacks on the Ukrainian capital. The barrage lasted well into the morning, with Russia also targeting a military facility in the west of the country. Stuart Smith's in Moscow. Stuart, what has been happening?
Well, according to Russian media sources, TASS, the state news agency here, explosions were reported throughout the night and during the day. Then some of those explosions were due to what TASS described as falling rocket debris. An air raid alert was sounded, and then the air defense in Kiev was activated. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense, of course, never says it's targeting any civilian areas. It claimed that these strikes are part of an attempt to hit command posts, radar stations, aircraft, and storage facilities for weapons and ammunition. It says it also managed to kill hundreds of Ukrainian armed forces personnel, and summarized the day's strikes by saying that all targets were hit and they have all been neutralized. On the other end of things, Russia says it intercepted certain munitions from Ukraine. For example, 3 Storm Shadow cruise missiles, 13 HIMARS rockets, and shot down 14 Ukrainian drones.
And Russia's confirmed Ukraine shelled settlements across the border.
That's right. Now, Belgorod was the focus, according to the governor of the region, over the last 24 hours and throughout the weekend, where one local official reported 300 times the region was shelled, killing 1 and injuring 3. The infrastructure damage reported there by local officials were damaged gas lines, 70 apartments damaged by the shelling. And all of that now, of course, in the context of the possibility that there will be a, quote, sabotage and reconnaissance group coming after these shellings. So for Belgorod, always been on the front line throughout the so-called special military operation, but the added risk of also Ukrainian incursions going over the border that Ukraine denies its forces are actually responsible. As to the one that happened this month, the largest land-based attack on Russian territory, Russia is now alleging that Polish and Americans participated in that group that went across the Russian border.
Stuart Smith in Moscow, thanks for that update. Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Ola Stefanishyna, is at a security conference in Bratislava. She told our reporter that Ukraine could lose support from some neighbouring countries as pro-Russian political parties there gain momentum.
Well, we've seen some of the unfortunate developments in the beginning of war, the withdrawal of a number of prime ministers across European countries ahead of the energy crisis affected by the war, the food crisis, and multiple issues. And this is the great basis for populists, for groups to spread false narratives and propaganda and disinformation. But we faced this crisis already. We became stronger and didn't affect the decisions. And I'm sure that regardless political transformations individually in the countries, it would not affect the major unity.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, how waste trucks are helping the UK achieve its net zero goals.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann. Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Erdogan re-elected. Turkey's president extends his rule into a third decade. Attacks on Kyiv continue as shelling is reported on the Russian side of the border with Ukraine. And Spain's Prime Minister calls for snap elections after his party received a drubbing in regional polls. A step back from the brink as a bipartisan deal is struck between US President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. But they now have to persuade lawmakers to pass it when the Congress votes as early as Wednesday. President Biden called the agreement a compromise, while Mr. McCarthy said it was worthy of the American people. The proposed deal doesn't raise the limit to a certain level, but enables the government to continue to borrow money into 2025. It includes keeping non-defence spending flat next year, with a 1% rise in 2025. The deal has to be pushed through the House and then Senate before the United States runs out of money on the 5th of June. A United Nations committee is meeting in Paris to work on a landmark treaty to end global plastic pollution. Our correspondent Lisa Ron has been breaking down the numbers.
Yes, Juliet, this is the second round of negotiations, with the first one in Uruguay about half a year ago, ending with little agreement between countries. Now the world produces about 430 million tons of plastics annually, with 2/3 of that being products that quickly become waste. On current trends, it's estimated that global plastic waste will triple by 2060. Only about 20% of the total waste will be recycled, half will end up in landfill. The United Nations says the plastic pollution could be slashed by 80% by 2040, with more of us reusing, recycling, repurposing and diversifying. Speaking at the meeting in Paris today, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme says more could be done to meet the plastic reduction target.
Current commitments will only reduce plastic pollution by 8% by 2040, so the tap is still wide open. And this agreement could be, must be, shall be the tool that the world uses to close that tap.
Now, they met 6 months ago in Uruguay. They're meeting in Paris, but they're not expecting to have a deal until the next meeting, the third meeting in December. What's taking so long for countries to come to an agreement on this?
I think a lot of people have the same question. How come it takes so long to have a treaty as such?
Yeah.
I mean, what is the treaty that we need? That is an effective international and legal binding agreement. So I would say it is quite an ambitious target for the reduction and the limitation of virgin plastic materials and problematic plastic products. So how can we do that? I mean, everything, look around, even in the studio. Plastic is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. I mean, the keyboards, the pen is made of plastic. How can we reduce the amount of use of plastics? There are altogether now 50 kinds of plastic so far. They're widely used in daily life, so it is very hard already. And the global plastic use, if we look at the projection, it will increase to around 12,000 million tons by 2060 if we don't do anything, if we don't take any actions. That means the plastics are in high demand, in strong demand. It's very hard for us to get rid of it at this point, or it's very hard for us to wean people off plastics altogether. The second reason, I think that the standards for recycling of plastics, each country has its own standard. We say that Japan has a very strong and strict regulation when it comes to recycling, so does South Korea. So globally, only 9% of plastic waste was recycled in 2019. Only 9%. Look at the number. I don't know if this pen, when its life is, the end of its life, I don't know if it will be recycled properly. Execution is the problem, and different countries will have different ways of when it comes to recycling of plastics. And the last reason, I think, that is international collaboration. It's very difficult, given the very tense geopolitical situation right now. We look at the war in Ukraine, we look at the trade war between China and the US. So it's very hard for different countries, the governments or international organizations, to sit down and work out a treaty.
So maybe slip down the agenda. It's usually,
Yes,
you're talking about recycling, it sometimes seems more expensive, but different companies and different sectors have found different ways, haven't they, to change things. So Mars bars in the UK, they're going to have a new wrapper that's going to be recyclable instead of the plasticky one. Similar things happening? What do consumers think of this?
I mean, there are a lot of similar moves, and starting today, I think that is a very good idea. The company is trialling recyclable paper packaging for a limited time, though, in 500 Tesco's starting today. And before that, I mean, Quality Strip Dish is traditional plastic wrapper for recyclable paper last Christmas, and these are very easy, but still, last October, no, not in October 2020, single-use plastic straws and bars were banned in the UK. So a lot needs to be done.
We'll continue talking about this later. Louise Jean-Hart, thank you very much. Well, road users in the UK are under growing pressure to avoid diesel transport as the country tries to reach its net zero targets. Now, a British company has sealed a deal to convert diesel waste trucks into their electric equivalent using the latest technology. Well, Kitty Logan reports from a tech hub beside the British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
Collecting household waste can be a messy business. Added to that are emissions from idling diesel engines on residential roads. Now, tech firm Lunas has found a fix for these polluting waste collection trucks, stripping out the dirty diesel engines while saving most original parts to create something more sustainable.
What we're looking to do is take those existing vehicles, convert them, upcycle them within the principles of the circular economy, and make sure that we're not adding to that vehicle car park around the world as that transition's made.
Lunas is teaming up with waste management company Biffa to help modernise its fleet. After this initial phase, the team hopes to expand the facility, aiming to convert over 1,000 industrial vehicles each year.
The pressure is now on to move away from diesel vehicles to meet net zero targets. But scrapping a large truck like this one also creates what's known as a carbon burden. Converting it instead from this to this electric version is much more beneficial for the environment in the long run.
While engineers remove all this from the old trucks, they're retaining what can be reused. By only replacing what's required for electrification, it avoids harmful waste.
21 tonnes of embedded carbon that we save in a 26-tonne truck during this process. In this building alone, we can save up to an Eiffel Tower's equivalent weight in embedded carbon every year.
The modified trucks are road tested here at Silverstone, next to the famous Grand Prix racetrack.
You know, in terms of efficiencies, it's got to do, when somebody buying an electric truck, paying the money that they are, this has to do what their diesel truck would do, either by end of shift or on the same amount of diesel. No ifs or buts.
Engineers are excited about how the truck's performing, and although it's high tech, it's low cost. Around $62,000 less than buying a brand new electric vehicle, with the same benefits and some added on.
The engine's completely gone, and just sat under there you've got a big electric motor with a two-speed transmission.
Instead, there's space for up to 6 batteries, while keeping many original features.
How much of this is actually the original bin truck that you've converted?
82% of it is carried over.
These old buttons were easy to reuse, and combined with the latest technology to navigate urban streets, it's as good as new. Just plug in and go.
Most of these are stood for 12 hours a day, so you can charge at 22 kilowatts and be perfectly fine.
Later this year, the trucks will head out from this factory to local communities, ensuring waste collection can become a much cleaner and quieter business. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Silverstone.
These pictures were captured by Dashcam as a driver made his way out of raging wildfires in Nova Scotia, Canada. The eastern city of Halifax declared a state of emergency on Sunday, and the fire has engulfed homes and forced evacuations. Earlier this month, the western province of Alberta declared a state of emergency after thousands were forced from their homes by wildfires. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has approved an anti-LGBTQ law with sentences that include the death penalty. The new law also punishes promoting homosexuality with a 20-year prison term. Same-sex relations are already illegal in the East African nation, as they are in 30 other African states. Gay rights activists in the country vowed to launch a legal challenge against the legislation. 7 people have admitted rioting during pro-democracy protests in 2019, which saw hundreds of people storm Hong Kong's legislature. They're among 13 people on trial following the demonstrations over a since-withdrawn extradition bill, which would have allowed authorities to send people to the Chinese mainland for trial. Around 2,900 individuals have been prosecuted on charges linked to the protests. The countdown is on for the launch of China's 3-member crew to Tiangong space station on Tuesday. The Taikonauts, or astronauts, will be conducting a 5-month tour of duty. It will be the 4th mission to space for the commander, Jing Haipeng, but the first space flight for flight engineer Zhu Jiangzhu. The 3rd crew member, Zhu Haichao, is a payload specialist from China's Beihang University. He'll be China's first civilian in space. Your main story again. Erdogan re-elected. Turkey's president extends his rule into a 3rd decade. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan a QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. Coming up next, it's World Insight with Qian Wei. For now, from all the team here in London, goodbye.